From 1990 to 1921, Poland went from being one of the poorest countries in Europe to being richer than most of the other post-Soviet states and even countries like Portugal. In my previous video, I talked about how they became and stayed so poor. It was the socialist occupation of the Soviet Union. Now we're talking about how they actually fixed most of their problems. It was primarily through shock therapy, which is funny because a lot of people act like shock therapy is terrible. The fact of the matter is, shock therapy worked in countries like West Germany and Bolivia, and then worked very well in Poland. I already pointed out last time how by the 80s, the people in Poland were incredibly poor and were experiencing rampant shortages. In 1988, an entrepreneur by the name of Mieczysław Wilczek was put in charge of the Ministry of Industry. In December of that year, he put through a very important act which drastically reduced government control over businesses. It was now much easier to start and run a business. But then a more important figure came along, Leszek Balcerowicz. He was an economist who had studied in the 70s in the United States. Initially, he was trying to come up with some way to fix socialism. But in studying economics, he realized that the socialists were just naive and they were never going to fix the problems. So he looked at anti-socialist economists like Mises and Hayek and realized that their ideas were far superior. He also studied the shock therapy that West Germany went through after World War II. As I already said, Poland was not in a good state at this point. Two of their biggest issues was a mountain of debt and rampant inflation. In 1989, their inflation was 640%, which was higher than other comparable countries like Hungary, Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, and Romania. Balcerowicz proposed several different reforms to fix these problems. This included very important things like bringing back a stock exchange, privatization of state-owned enterprises, and tax reform. The reforms were incredibly successful too. In 1989, their inflation was 3,000% CPI. By 1993, it was 37.6%. They also opened up their country to investment from foreign countries, and their shops were now filled with high-quality goods for the first time since the socialist takeover. Between 1990 and 1993, more than 1 million private firms were established in Poland. The private sector's share of the workforce went from 13.2% in 1989 to 34.4% in 1992, or 60% of the workforce if you include agriculture and cooperatives. Foreign companies invested $60 million in 1989. By 1993, it was $1.5 billion. Many households were now getting products that they never had access to, like radios, televisions, VCRs, washing machines, freezers, cars. One economist described Poland as the unrivaled leader of transition and Europe's and the world's growth champion. Poland grew faster than all of the post-communist states, which is a pretty important point because, again, a lot of people argue against shock therapy and say we should have a more gradual change instead. Yet Poland, that underwent shock therapy, did much better than these countries that did gradual changes. Now, Poland isn't quite where it should be. In the OECD countries, it ranks #1 in state-owned industries, but it has come a long way. Unfortunately, their privatization efforts have stagnated, but the Polish people are still the most pro-capitalist people in the entire world. If Poland gets back to the reforms and follows what the people actually want, becomes a more capitalist country, then it might just become the richest country in Europe. Once again, the source for all of this is this new book I've been reading, How Nations Escape Poverty. You can get it with the link in my bio.